My name is Pixie Smith, and I'm the Southeast Region sales rep for RCL Benziger Publishing. And we are so glad to sponsor Dan Mulhall that will be doing this session. And I just wanted to get a feel for how many of you have ever said, darn those parents. I mean, how many of you have ever said, God bless those parents. I'm so glad they bring their children to me, and what a leap of faith they have taken to entrust their children to our catechist and us, because, you know, I know those parents are having a tough time out there, and sometimes it's all they can do to muster enough energy and enough faith themselves to bring their kids to me, and what an awesome privilege and responsibility we have to help them raise their children in the faith and maybe give to them for whatever reason they remain at arm's length away from the parish, or that they may feel like they can't give to their children. So anybody in here ever have those? Okay. Dan will help us partner with those parents and make the catechesis effective. All right? Let's have a nice round of applause for Dan.
Thanks, Pixie, and thank you all for coming. I will do my best to keep you, if not entertained, at least involved and engaged, and so that you don't snore too loudly, okay? And I won't take offense if you do. Many of the workshops that you've heard today have dealt with very practical, very hands-on. What I'm going to do in my presentation is try to help you understand the bigger picture of catechesis and why it's so important for us to be successful as catechists, why we need to be working very closely with parents. And so keep that in mind as we go through. I'd like to begin with song, and I'd like you may know the song. It's by John McCutcheon. It's called Water from Another Time. New mown hay on a July morn, grandkids running through the knee-high corn, sunburned nose and a scabbed up knee from the rope at the white oak tree. Just another summer's day on Grandpa's farm, with Grandma's bucket hanging from my arm. Oh, the old pump's rusty, but it works fine, primed with water from another time. Oh, it don't take much, but you've got to have some. The old ways help the new ways come. Just leave a little extra for the next in line. You're gonna need a little water from another time. Patchwork quilt on a goose-down bed. Every stitch tells a story, my grandma said. Her papa's nightgown, Grandpa's pants, and the dress she wore to her high school dance. And at night I lay wrapped in those patchwork seams. I waltz with Grandma in my dreams. Their stories fill my heart and mind with water from another time. Oh, it don't take much, but you've got to have some. The old ways help the new ways come. Just leave a little extra for the next in line. You're gonna need a little water from another time. Newborns cry in the morning air. The past and the future are wedded there. The well springs of my sons and daughters, the bone and blood of living waters. And while Grandpa's bones have turned to dust, like Grandma's pump reduced to rust, their stories fill my heart and mind with water from another time. Oh, it don't take much, but you've got to have some. The old ways help the new ways come. Just leave a little extra for the next in line. You're going to need a little water from another time. Thank you. Pixie's going to serve as my angel back here and move the PowerPoint forward, because otherwise I'd be running back and forth, and that wouldn't be good for any of us. But I sing that song for a very particular purpose, besides the fact that I like the song. But I sing it because I think it makes clear to us in a very sensible way just how faith is formed. Right? That faith is formed in the living. Faith is formed in the living. Instruction is a key part of that living, but instruction is not the same as the living. And so we participate in the process of formation. Our catechetical sessions are not the process of formation. We are only a small part of that puzzle. Back in the early 1960s, a Protestant theologian by the name of C. Ellis Nelson wrote the book, Where Faith Begins. And in that book, Nelson made it real clear. He was writing to the Protestant church community. And what he was noticing at that time was that the participation in Protestant churches was on a downward slope. They were losing memberships by the millions. And people were wondering why. Why are people not coming to church? And Nelson pointed out that they had put all their eggs in the basket of Sunday school, all their eggs in the basket of instruction, and they were losing that sense of belonging to a community of faith where faith was passed on from one generation to the next by the living of the faith. Nelson had a student by the name of John Westerhoff. And John Westerhoff wrote the book, Will Our Children Have Faith? And this was in the mid-1970s. And Westerhoff's book was saying, if we continue following that trend, our children will not have faith. Now, what's the situation in your parish? How many children come back to your programming after baptism, after First Communion, after confirmation? Are they coming back in record numbers, or are they leaving in record numbers? The statistics from the Pew Trust study of religion tells us that Catholics are losing 30% or more of our young people every year. And most of them are leaving before the age of 18. And they're leaving not because they're attracted away by another church. They are leaving because they are not involved. And their religion is disengaged. In fact, the research tells us that the fastest growing tradition in the United States today is disengaged. People, they're not agnostic, they're not atheist, they just simply don't care. And so much so that Bob McCarty, who's the head of the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministry, now wonders whether our faith will have children. Right? Now, is it all bad news? Of course not. Wonderful things are happening in your parish, probably in every one of your parishes, and that's good. But the point that I'm trying to address is we are losing young people and we are losing their families, and oftentimes it's because they are not involved in the living of the faith. And our programming is such that what we focus on is only on the doctrinal instruction, but we have no formal process involved to help bring about faith formation. Pixie. So there's 3 points I want to make that are above the whole, across the whole spectrum. Is that for faith to be formed fully, it must be formed in the family, it must be formed in the community, and by community I mean both the church, the parish community, and the neighborhood community, the surrounding area community, and it must always be engaged in what's going on in the larger society. It's not enough for us simply to instruct young people about what we believe. What we also have is we also have to help them understand how to live that faith in the world in which they live. So we're not just worried about head knowledge, but we're also worried about heart knowledge and hand knowledge and feet knowledge. Where are they grounded? How do they put their faith into action? How do they feel? How do they emote? How do they learn to love and care as a member of the Catholic community? That's our challenge in catechesis. That we bring to this picture not just a picture of we have to teach what's in the textbooks or what we do in the classroom, but we have to begin to recognize that we have a process of formation that we need to be involved with. And we ask the question, how do we do this? Let me offer you a simple formula. And if you have a piece of paper and you're taking notes, draw a triangle on your paper, a triangle like this. And if you don't have a piece of paper, you can make it with your fingers. Right? Now I call this the learning ratio, and this is based upon brain research. If you know anything about brain research today, they can now, using fMRI machines, actually watch what areas of your brain lights up when you see a picture, when you think about something, when you do something. So we actually now know, because through the brain research, just what is happening when we learn how to do something, right? Now, here's the ratio for learning. Every time that you think or do something, it makes no difference what, it's just not based on religion, it's whatever, your brain fires, and synapses are formed in the brain. And those synapses, the more times that they fire, the more times they get involved, the stronger those synapses become. All right? But here's the ratio. For every hour of instruction, okay, you've drawn your triangle. Now draw two horizontal lines across your triangle, dividing it in thirds. Right? You divide your triangle in thirds. The ratio is this. For every hour of instruction, which is the first part of the triangle, you need 3 hours of using the concept in order for the synapses to be formed strong enough that you remember. Have you ever had a session with students where you taught them a topic this week? Let's say you taught reconciliation this week. And they come back next week and you say, what did we talk about last week? And their answer is, I don't know. What happened? Did they listen last week? Of course they listened last week. They sit in rapt attention to anything you have to say. But what happened is that they went home, and for the next week, that thought that you taught them never even entered their mind again, even for a second. And so when you come back the next week and you want to talk about the topic, there's no brain connection. It's just not there. So in order for that 1 hour of instruction that you have, for that to take root in their brains, they need to have 3 hours. That's the second part of your triangle. They need to have 3 hours of using that concept, talking about it with their parents, doing homework, doing activities, going to Mass, whatever. There has to be 3 hours, right? Now, in the brain research, what that shows us is that the synapses actually get made, and so when you ask them the question the next time, they will at least remember the concept. But you still have the bottom third of the triangle, right? And that bottom third of the triangle is, again, 3 times as large as the second part, 9 hours. You need 9 hours of actually living the concept in order for that concept to become yours. Now let me use a sports analogy to make this real clear. Have you ever watched a professional basketball player prepare to shoot a free throw? You know, Steve Nash is great at this. He goes through the same routine every time before he shoots a free throw. Does this. Right? He doesn't have a ball. Doesn't have a ball at all. He's going through the routine so that when he gets the ball, he knows exactly what to do. And then when he gets the ball, he does the same thing. Dribble, shoots. He's the best free throw shooter in the National Basketball Association for years and years and years. Right? Well, now what's happened? Why is he so good at this? Why is he so good at this? Well, it comes naturally now. But it's not, a lot of people say it's muscle memory. Well, muscles don't have memories, right? Brain has memories. What's happened is his synapses have gotten so strong that it's automatic. He doesn't have to think anymore. It just happens. It just happens. Well, that's the same way with living faith. We don't learn to live faith in the 1 hour of instruction. We learn to live faith in the 9 hours of living. And that's where it becomes honed, and that's where the synapses become so tight and so strong, right? Now, once upon a time, not too long ago, we could count on faith being taught in the family. We could count on faith being taught within the local community. And we could count on faith being shared by the larger society, right? And because of that, we didn't have to worry about that. And so we could teach. We could instruct because we knew that faith was being lived and taught every day in every way by family, community, and society. But what's happened in the last 50 years? What's happened to the family in the last 50 years? You know, we've moved away from extended families, and so we no longer live in the same neighborhood with grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. And so we have mom and dad, if we're lucky, who are living together, and they're the ones who are trying to do what extended families used to do many, many years, not so long ago. What happened to our parish communities, and what happens to our neighborhoods? We've moved from everybody knew each other, everyone was engaged, we all needed each other, to now we're in a situation where people, I may talk to my neighbors twice a year. And that's to say, I'm going on vacation. Would you pick up the mail while I'm gone? We don't do anything together. I don't know their names. I don't know their children. Right? Now, I'm not saying everything's bad about that. I'm just saying it's a change. We no longer have those communities of faith. Our parishes are different as well. They've gotten bigger. We don't know everyone in our communities. Many people parish shop. And so you don't have those close-knit communities. And our larger society, for all that it does wonderful things, also has brought in the internet and internet pornography. We've also got where social media is a wonderful gift, but it's also teaching people relationship skills with their thumbs, but not with their hands and voices. Many young people today are not able to carry on a conversation with a human being in person. They can do it over the text, but it's much easier than it is to actually have those conversations, right? The problem is we're still teaching, our instruction is still being done as if the assumptions were still valid. And so the challenge becomes, what do we need to be doing for our instruction to be effective? What do we need to be changing, or what do we need to be addressing? And the key component, Pixie, the key component is parents. Every church document since the Second Vatican Council has made the statement that parents are the primary educators of their children. Primary educators of their children. Now, what does that mean? Some people say it means that parents are the one who make the decisions about what their children learn or don't learn. And that's true. Some people say it means that parents should be teaching their children and we should not. I would disagree with that. What I think it means, and what the research says, is that parents are the people who have the most influence upon their children. Thanks, Pixie. What we know from the research is that parents are the ones that kids look up to and want to emulate. Parents, they look up to the kids and want to emulate. Parents have more impact on their children than social media, than peers, than TV, or anything else. And it's because when the children are growing up, they see us, and they say, I want to be like you. Now, they may not tell you that, but children want to be like their parents or their grandparents or whoever the significant others are in their lives growing up. The research shows that the people who are second most important are teachers. Why? Because they spend so much time with the kids. And third are coaches, especially as kids get older. The coaches are the ones that kids look to for guidance and direction. but it's primarily the parents. Pixie made the comment, and I'd like to address it just briefly. She made the comment that oftentimes, and she didn't say it this way, I will, oftentimes those of us who work with parents, work with catechesis, are frustrated because the parents aren't as engaged in the process of faith formation as we'd like them to be, right? And the reason we're frustrated is that we need them. We need them to be addressing these questions and these important issues, and they're not. But there's a danger, and Pixie alluded to this. There's a danger when we talk and think about the role of parents. Sometimes we're tempted to say that the parents don't care. Now, that's dangerous because when we say that, we are putting us into an adversarial role with the parents. It's us against them. We care about your kids and you don't. Right? And what happens in adversarial relationships? We fight. We fight. We don't need to be fighting with parents. We need to be wooing parents. We need to be engaging parents so that they begin to see why this is so important. So the next time that you think parents don't care, remember that. Parents do care. If parents did not care, they would what? Not bring their children to you. Parents still want what the church has to offer. The problem isn't that they don't care, it's that they don't know what or how. Have you ever taken a picture and put it on a copy machine and made a copy of the picture? What happens to the picture, the copy of the picture? What happens to it? It gets darker, starts to fade, it gets grainier, right? What happens if you make a copy of that copy? It gets worse, and each time it gets worse, right? We're now in the fifth generation that's occurred since the 1950s. And that's when the transition started to break down in the 1950s. When a lot of people say those were the golden years. Well, that's when everything started to change. It was in the 1950s, and it blew up in the 60s, but it started to change in the 50s. This is the fifth generation of parents. And what happens is each generation is less well prepared to pass on the traditions and values of the previous generation than it was the generation before. So I learned less from my parents than my parents learned from their parents. Right? So each generation, we become a little less, unless we make an intentional effort to really study and learn the traditions and values of the previous generation, each generation is going to pass on a little less and a little less. We now are at a point where many of the parents of the young people who you catechize, they have had very little passed on to them. The bishops of the United States did a survey of parents with young children, and they asked them questions. The simple question, what do you need from the church? And the parents named 10 things. I don't have all 10 things in my memory bank, but I do have 4 things that the parents said these are crucial to us if you want to help us. Teach us how to pray. Parents are saying, teach us how to pray. We don't know how to pray. Teach us how to teach our children how to pray. They don't know how. Teach us the traditions and values of the church. We don't know them. Teach us the traditions and values. And then teach us how to teach our children those traditions and values. What's that tell you? It doesn't say that they don't care. It says they want to know. They want to learn. Yes?
What are you attributing this? I mean, each generation is less prepared. Why?
Well, because culture interferes. Culture begins to people get because, well, for example, my parents were born at a time where they didn't have, at my mother's house, they didn't have an outhouse. I mean, they didn't have indoor plumbing. They had an outhouse. Well, as soon as they get indoor plumbing, it becomes easier. And so all the traditions that were involved with something like this becomes easier. And each generation, technology and other things have made the traditions. So you no longer have to do some of the things that you had to do before. Like I don't mean to make having an outhouse or not the big issue, but the point is you learn certain values because of the hardships that you go through, or because of the struggles you go through. And when you don't have those struggles or hardships, those values, they may not get learned. Yes?
I don't think it's not the struggle. I think people don't talk to their kids about the struggle they encounter and vice versa.
Right.
As far as the struggles their parents.
One of the major changes that has taken place is that we no longer talk to our children, and we no longer talk to each other. We are losing relationship skills because we're not practicing them. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, if you're living in a time where your job, it doesn't take you more than 3 minutes away from home, and you come home every day for lunch, and your spouse is there and doesn't work outside the home, and the spouse is there, and the kids come home from lunch because of school, right? Because they're only a short walk from home, then you really build strong family communities. When you don't have that, then all that what used to happen naturally is not happening. We now know from research that the average length of time that parents speak in non-directive ways with their children is between 3 and 5 minutes a day. Non-directive means, I'll tell you what directive means. Directive means do this, don't do that, pick up your clothes, come to dinner, take a bath. We talk a lot to them about that. But rarely do we ever talk to our young people about issues of faith, about issues of values, about issues of love or respect, or any of those natures. And yet, we know also from the research that it's only in the communication of that type that children actually learn and engage the thought processes where they actually beginning to learn the language of faith and the values of faith. Right? And so, Kenda Creasy-Dean, who is a researcher, teaches at Princeton Theological, has written a book called Almost Christian, A-L-M-O-S-T, Christian. And her point is this, that the only way we learn to speak our faith and to share our faith with others is by speaking our faith and sharing it with others. And if I'm going to learn, and she would say to us, if I'm going to be teaching a class of students a topic of faith, we should have far more conversation and less indoctrination. That doesn't mean we don't present the teaching of the faith, but that our very classroom should be changing so it actually provides young people the opportunity to actually talk about their faith, where they actually learn to share faith with others, and they actually have a chance to say, well, do I believe this? I had this happen to me the other day. I was talking with someone, and they say, I believe this fully. And then as they started to explain what they believe, they said, wait a minute, I don't believe that at all. Here's what I believe. And that's what we need to get young people, and we need to do this ourselves. We need to begin having those conversations with others. We need to become less focused on telling you this is what you have to believe, and helping people engage in that conversation about why they believe this. And it's in that sharing and talking that they become clearly understand. They begin to clearly understand themselves why this is so important. Kenda Creasy-Dean's comment is, it's when talking and sharing our faith with each other that I talk myself into knowing what I believe. I don't convince myself in the untruth, but I'm able to articulate why I believe. But understand, faith formation is not just about words, it's about the culture of living. And that becomes a challenge for us. So, the research that I'm basing this talk on comes from the National Study of Youth and Religion, which was done in 2002, and research continues between 2005, and actually they've just done a new study with the same group just 2 years ago. This research interviewed teenagers and now young adults about their belief. And one of the key things that they found that if you want to reach kids, the most effective way of doing that is by reaching their parents. And if you want to influence kids, the most effective way of doing that is by influencing the parents. That children are not different from their parents. They actually resemble and reflect the beliefs, attitudes, values of their parents. So let's look at that question. What is the relationship that we need to be developing between parents and ourselves? So, what do parents do? They entrust us with their children. They give us what? They give us what is most precious to them. And they asked us to do what? They asked us to bring their children to faith. But wait a minute. I just said that it's not possible for us within our classroom to bring them to faith. Right? Who's responsible for the faith formation of the children? Parents. We're not responsible for the faith formation of the children. We are responsible for the instruction of the children. But it only works if the parents recognize that their relationship and they have responsibility for bringing young people to faith. And so, no, just leave it right there. So what we have to recognize and what we have to make parents understand is that we will instruct their children as fully and as we possibly can. We will teach them with dignity and respect. We will treat them with dignity and respect. And we will use all types of creative means to do that. But we also need to make sure that parents understand that they also have a responsibility in this process. And what's their responsibility? And I would suggest is that they need to provide a home life where faith is enculturated in daily living. Faith is enculturated in daily living. And if you go back to the triangle, that's the 9 hours. The faith is enculturated. That they are going to put into practice the beliefs, attitudes, values that are incorporated into the teaching that we offer. What do we mean by enculturation? Enculturation is the word the sociologists use to describe the way we learn a culture. The way we learn a culture. How many of you are married? All right. Do you remember the first time when you went to visit your new in-laws? Right? Was it a good time? Was it a bad time? Was it strange? You know, the thing is that when you moved from your family of formation into another family, you've crossed a cultural divide. And it's going to be different. It may be great, but it's going to be different because it's unusual, it's strange, because it's a different culture. When people come to us today and they have not been enculturated into the Catholic way of life, they don't know how we act. They don't know how we think. They don't know how we pray. And they're going to feel uncomfortable and they're going to feel shy. And so it's important that we recognize that we have to enculturate them. We have to help them learn the values, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors of what it means to be Catholic. So what are some Catholic attitudes that young people and their families need to be aware of? What are things that we do as Catholics? What are our attitudes? Yes? So we come together on a weekly basis and we worship God. And we not only worship God, but we take in the Eucharist. We participate in both the sacrifice of the Mass, but we also participate where we take in and we become what we eat. We take in the body and blood of Christ so that we may live out and act as the body and blood of Christ, right? That's a Catholic attitude. Other Catholic attitudes. Prayer. Prayer. We pray constantly. Whether we do a formal 8 or 10 or 12-hour days, but we know that as a Catholic attitude, we pray on a regular basis. And we pray for people, right? And we pray through people, the saints, the communion of saints. Those are Catholic attitudes. What else? What other attitudes do we have? What's our attitude? Yes. We respect life. We respect life from cradle to grave, from natural conception to natural death. And the whole thing is a matter of respecting for life. Well, so everything we do is an attitude about respect life. Yes? Can you speak a little louder? We serve. We care for others. We have, as part of our mantra, the spiritual and corporal works of mercy. We visit the hungry. We feed the hungry. We clothe the naked. We visit the sick and those imprisoned. We educate those who are ignorant, the way it's formally said. Right? Those are Catholic attitudes. We have Catholic values. We have Catholic beliefs. What are some of our behaviors that we do as Catholics? We go to church, and we reach our hands into the holy water fountain, and we make the sign of the cross. We wear scapulars. We wear crosses. We wear medals, holy medals. Right? I mean, and the list could go on and on and on and on and on. Yes? Sure. One of the things, I don't like the term a la carte Catholic, and I don't like it because there's a pejorative tone to it. Not that you're giving it that, but it tends to be a pejorative tone. You know, what the issue becomes is that people are not aware of what all those values, traditions are. We've not done a good job because of the breakdown of the society. We've not done a good job of really educating people in what all the traditions and values are. It's not that they pick and choose. Oftentimes they don't know or they don't know the value. One of the critical losses in today's society is discernment. You know, the skill of discernment. And what is discernment? Discernment is the process by which you can weigh two things or more and understand the perceived value of this and the perceived value of this, and you'll know which is the better choice. But oftentimes today, we have people making decisions that are, you know, do I play soccer on Sunday morning or go to Mass? As if their values were the same. And so they may be making bad choices, not because they're picking and choosing which ones appeal to them, but they're making bad choices because they don't understand the relative piece of this. So one of the challenges that we have as catechists is to help them recognize the value, to help them begin to understand that do you have a choice? Sure, you have a choice. You don't have to go to Mass on Sunday if you don't want to. Nobody's going to make you. You're not going to get, God's not going to strike you down with lightning if you don't. But what's going to happen with your life? That's right. What's going to be happening to you long term? What happens to the whole bit? Right? We have to find ways of helping them to understand the value so that they can make informed choices, not choices out of ignorance. Now, how do we do that? Part of that whole process is to help people go through that process where they actually have to weigh the value of their choices and decisions. How do you learn to make good decisions? You make bad decisions. I mean, that's how you learn to make good decisions. You learn to make good decisions because you do something stupid and you say, that was stupid. I won't do that again. Right? Now, part of our process, part of our learning process is to provide people with opportunities to make decisions and then live with the consequences of their decisions without them being too painful. So what happens if you make this decision and they make that decision? And let's talk about it. Well, what happens if you choose to do this? What happens to this? What happens to this? What happens to this? Right? We need to help people work through that process of discernment so they come to that realization. Sir, you had a... Yeah.
The challenge is, I like to call them, the Sunday morning curb parent.
Mm-hmm.
Drops the child off at the curb and picks them up at the curb. Doesn't go to Mass. Maybe they haven't Mass. Okay. So now you're dealing with the kids.
Yep.
And I might have to suffer look me right in the eye and say, my parents don't go.
Yep.
I go until a certain point.
Right.
And
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Now here's, and this is my opinion on this, but I look at our system, and I think we have, over the course of the last 50 to 70 years, told parents, you do not have to catechize your children, we'll do it for you. Right? And so we've sort of professionalized catechesis, which has been good. We have much better textbooks, we have training for teachers, we do a much better job of it than we used to do. But in the process, parents have become less and less responsible for the catechesis of their children. And so they are used to not doing anything but dropping their kids off. You know, I said earlier that the parents care very deeply about their children, and they want the best for their children, right? What they don't care about is your program. They don't care about your class. They don't care about what you're trying to do in your class. And why is that? Please?
They don't feel it pertains to them.
It doesn't pertain to them. That's exactly right. They don't believe it pertains to them because they are not essential for the success of your program. The only way we change that is if we change the relationship between ourselves and the parents. And I start here, and I spend so much time on this point for a very particular reason, is because we have to first change our attitudes before we can change and work with the attitudes of the parents. If it's essential for us to have the support of parents for our classes to be successful, then in our planning, we must ask the question, how are we going to engage the parents in the process? That's a change on our part. Yes?
I wanted to add that as much as parents are the primary influence over their children,
Yep.
I believe that children are an extremely influential part of their parents' life. And if a child says, take me to this basketball game or take me to
Right.
this concert, a parent will not want to do that. If the child comes back and says, take me to mass, a parent will oblige. And what our responsibility is to enthuse the child and educate the child to understand why.
We need to do both. We need to both engage and influence and enthuse the child, but at the same time, we need to be able to enthuse and engage the parents. Because why? I mean, as much as we can reach the parents to the kids, we cannot hold the child responsible for the parents bringing them to mass. We can't hold the child responsible for their parents' behaviors or actions. And so we have to find a balance between the two. Yes?
And it seems like that's the issue. You have these parents are having their own faith battles that because of certain situations don't have the tools to be successful. And then they're turning around and pushing their children into the catechesis, and then it's like I have no arms and I'm trying to teach my kid how to play basketball.
Well, that's exactly it. That's exactly the point.
So then the point is how are we supposed to, like you said, how are we supposed to engage the parents? And if they're having their own faith battle, everybody's had one where they're just so exhausted, they don't know what to do next, and so they're basically putting their hands up and says, I don't want to do it.
There are no right or wrong answers. There's no absolute answers on how to do that. But here are some suggestions. Pixie, you want to move to the next one? The first thing we need to do is recognize that we need to reach out to the parents and let them know what their responsibilities are. Right? So we have to make sure that we're clear with them that they know that while we can do certain things with their kids, there are things we cannot do with their children. And so the first thing we need to have them recognize is that they have to agree to work closely with us. All right? So we have to make it clear up front that dropping your kids off and not being engaged in the faith formation of their children won't work. We have to be honest ourselves with them and say, we cannot bring your children to faith without your participation. Are we willing to say that? Because that lessens our sense of value and our sense of purpose as well, because we're no longer in charge. We're switching from saying we catechize the kids and the parents help us to saying the parents catechize the kids and we help them. You see, it's a change in attitude. What we have to recognize for that change in attitudes is that we have to inform the parents that they have to be actively involved if we're going to be successful. And so the first thing they have to agree to is that they're going to work closely with us, informing their children in faith. Right? What does that mean, work closely with us? What do we need from the parents? So we need them to do what? You say engagement, but what do you mean? They need to be talking with their children about faith issues. We know from the research, the National Study of Youth and Religion, that there is a one-to-one correlation between the number of adult witnesses in the lives of children and whether those children will have faith. Now, here's what that means. That if I have one faith witness in my life, I'm 1 time as likely to have faith as someone who has 5 faith witnesses. And if I have 20 faith witnesses, I'm 20 times more likely to have faith myself than someone who only has 1. That means that I need people, I need adults throughout the whole church community who are witnessing their faith to children. But it has to start with parents. I need mom and dad, and I need brothers and sisters because they're the most influential. They need to be witnessing to their children. And by witnessing, not only in living, but sharing faith stories and talking about faith and talking about what faith means to them, even if it's not educated. Ma'am?
One of the things that I will address with this gentleman is, as a parent, one of the things that has always been difficult for me is not knowing
Yep.
what my children are doing in class.
Yep.
And as a catechist, and as we're doing this, one of my thoughts is I need to be the communicator to
Yep.
the parents as to what's going on in class so that they can learn.
Exactly. So we make a commitment, and that's why I say it starts with you. We have to make a commitment that we are going to communicate with the parents every chance we get, and we're going to provide them not only with information, but we're going to provide them with suggestions, we're going to provide them with ideas, we're going to offer them very simple things that they can be doing at home to practice and to live out whatever we taught that week. So if I'm teaching reconciliation, for example, what do I want my parents to be doing at home? Going to the confession may be on the long end of this. Eventually, we want to get them to confession. But what do we want them to teach their kids? We want them to talk about what do we want to teach them? We want to teach them forgiveness. We want to teach them to be able to say, and if I may use you, sir, as an example, I apologize. And you accept my apology, right? Right? Something as simple as that. Are you familiar with Boys Town, Girls Town, right? In Omaha and now around the rest. You may have one here in Atlanta, I don't know. But years ago, they began teaching kids basic skills. Now, these are young, troubled kids who don't have relationship skills. They don't have healthy relationship skills. And they found the best way that they could help kids learn relationship skills was directly teach them. And the first skill they taught them was how to make a friend. And it was very simple. They said, "Hi, I'm Dan. Nice to meet you, Adolfo." That very simple skill began to break down the barriers. The very simple skill of saying to you, "I apologize," and you saying, "I accept my apology," that's a wonderful skill. Those are things that we can help the parents understand. This is something simple you can do. Something simple that you can do is teach parents very simple simple rituals that they can be doing at home about forgiveness or about whatever the theme is. Like one of the rituals is just saying doing the sign of the cross together. So there are 4 times during the course of the day when children are most open to learning new ideas, surprisingly. Those 4 times during the day are in the morning when they get up, in the afternoon when they come home from school, in the evening before dinner, and before they go to bed. And those are the times that we need to help parents to have conversations with their kids and talk about things of the day. Did anyone do anything to you? Did you see anything today that you wanted that upset you? How would you have responded to that? How should you have responded to that? What difference does that make in your respect and the way you treat others? Right? Very, very simple things. We need to teach parents these. Now, it's not because parents are stupid. Many of them know this. They need to understand that this is part of the process of faith formation. We also need parents to continue to grow in their own understanding of religious formation. Right? We want them to continue their own journey of faith. And for some of our parents, it might be going to Mass. And that's our goal. That's what we want to get them to. But it might start by simply getting up each day and saying, God, thank you for keeping me alive. Thank you for my kids. That might be the starting point. But we need them to commit to each day participating in something where they continue to grow in faith. We need to make sure that we provide them with the resources to do that. Right? And the third thing is that they are going to do practices in their home that are going to promote and share the values and traditions that we are promoting as part of faith formation. Yes?
I think that we have become Catholics by Olympics. We have goals to achieve, and we say, okay, the child is baptized, confirmation, communion, confirmation, we'll make confirmation, we're done. And I was having a conversation with one of the ministers in the church, and there were 25 parents there, lady parents, mothers of child. And I asked them a question. I said, how many of you see confirmation as the ultimate goal? And most of them did.
Right.
And then I was reading a study that was done that we confirmed 1 million youngsters last year. 1/3 of those will not come back to the church.
Right.
By 1 year later.
I'll be right with you. Pixie, find this slide for me, would you please? That slide right there. Yep. You're absolutely right. And so one of the things that we have to recognize is when we think about the preparation we do in faith formation, what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to get through the lesson in the textbook, or are we trying to bring young people to faith? And our goal has to be bringing them to faith. And that recognizing that the lesson in the textbook is the process we use to bring them to faith. But achieving the textbook, going through all the textbook, or receiving the sacrament is not the same as having faith. We want to prepare young people for second and third and fourth communion, not first communion. Because we're teaching them become sacramental livers, not just the celebrating of the event. Confirmation should not be a process by which we exit people out of the church. It should be a process while we initiate people in the life of the church, right? But that's our intentionality. We can't blame people for leaving if we're basically opening the door and pushing them out the door. So part of the things we have to look at is we have to look at our assumptions, we have to look at our practices. We have 5 minutes left. And by the way, if you would like to have a copy of this PowerPoint, I'd be happy to send it to you. You can, but I'm going to send it to Pixie, and you can just reach her. Her email address is psmith, P-S-M-I-T-H, at rclbenziger.com. rclbenziger.com. And Pixie Smith is P. Smith, S-M-I-T-H, right? And she'll send it to you, and that way you'll have it. rclbenziger.com. Yes. Yeah. Can you speak just a little louder?
How much of the influence of the parents do you think is on the fact that we're losing a lot of our teens and 11
Yeah.
even though those parents are very Christian and they're following the example, the kids are still leaving, and they're not leaving the church, they're going to other churches.
Well, I don't know about locally, so I can't speak locally. I can only say that in the research from the Pew Center says that they're not going to other churches. Those who are going to other churches are oftentimes being wooed away by their friends and compatriots. Those who are leaving religion altogether, they've never been ingrained in the faith. Their parents may have religion, but somehow or other the children have never been initiated in the life of the faith community. They've never really become a part of the culture. And that becomes a challenge. But in many cases, it's not that the parent, it's because the parents themselves have not been very actively or engaged. And they may not have taught the children. But I can't judge that for individual parents. We're out of time. I'd just like to go through these 5 points with you, very quickly. These are questions that you can ask your parents and have them do at home and use these as building blocks for moving forward in your relationship with the families. What gifts and talents do our family have? Help them to identify their strengths. Help them to identify their gifts and talents so that each family can, in its own way, live out its strengths. What do we do well? Perhaps we sing, perhaps we dance, perhaps we cook, perhaps we make fun of each other. I don't know. What about our family brings us joy? What values guide our family life? What does it mean to be a Catholic family? How do we show others that we're Catholic? And how do we pray and celebrate rituals? Have them identify these points for themselves and use those as starting points for the conversation. Let me end briefly. The work you do as catechists may be the most important work that the church does, because it passes on the faith from one generation to the next. Here's why it becomes even more important. Up until this current generation, faith has been passed on from generation to generation through families just automatically. Part of growing up. Research is showing that this generation of parents are no longer passing on the faith to their children. If we are going to have, if Bob McCarty's statement is not going to become true, will our faith have children? We have to make an intentional effort of making sure that the faith continues to be passed on from generation to generation, which means we need to work closely with parents. We have to recognize that we cannot bring children to faith. We can provide a process, and we can work with parents to bring children to faith. It's a change in our role and a change in our attitude. I want to end with a final song. It's by Stan Rogers. It's called Field Behind the Plow. I think it's the Catechist anthem. Well, the good times come and go, but at least there's rain, so this won't be barren ground when September rolls around. So watch the field behind the plow turn to straight, dark rows, put another season's promise in the ground. And may you continue to do that with God's blessing. Thank you. Thank you very much.